I want to talk about something that doesn't get talked about enough. Something that, on the surface, sounds warm and generous, maybe even admirable. But underneath, it can be a trap, a habit, and a shield that keeps us from true connection and authentic living. I want to talk about being too friendly, not kind, not compassionate, not respectful, but too friendly, the version of ourselves that smiles when we want to speak up, that says yes when every part of us is screaming no, that leans in when we should be stepping back. That friendliness that comes from fear, not freedom. Being too friendly often stems from fear, not authenticity. At first glance, friendliness appears to be a virtue we should all strive for. It looks like open doors, warm smiles, and invitations to connection. But beneath the surface, there's often a different story playing out, one that has little to do with genuine kindness and everything to do with safety, protection, and the fear of rejection. Many people have learned to be excessively friendly, not because they want to be, but because they feel they have to be. It becomes a strategy, a kind of armor that they put on in order to navigate relationships, workplaces, even family dynamics. That smile might not be a signal of warmth, but a carefully chosen mask designed to avoid conflict. That helpfulness may not come from generosity, but from the anxious need to stay relevant, liked, or needed. This type of friendliness is deeply tied to our early experiences. For those who grew up in environments where their needs were dismissed or where anger or disagreement led to punishment, being overly nice became a way to survive. They learned that friendliness was safer than honesty, that agreement was safer than truth. It's a behavior that's rooted in deep emotional wiring, not just in the desire to be pleasant. And while it may look like connection on the outside, inside it can feel like invisibility. You smile, nod, agree, and accommodate, not because it reflects how you feel, but because it feels like the only way to protect yourself from disapproval, abandonment, or discomfort. The fear that drives this behavior isn't always obvious. Sometimes it's buried beneath years of conditioning. People say, "I'm just easygoing," or "I like making others happy," when really what they fear is what might happen if they stop. They fear that setting a boundary will make someone angry. They fear that saying no will result in being left out. They fear that being honest about what they need will make them seem selfish or difficult. And so they continue the cycle, responding with friendliness in every situation, even when what's called for is clarity, distance, or a firm line in the sand. This fear-based friendliness often becomes automatic. It shows up in professional settings where someone takes on extra work to avoid disappointing a colleague. It shows up in friendships where one person is always the listener, but never the one being heard. It shows up in relationships where one partner constantly overextends themselves, afraid that saying what they really feel might threaten the harmony. Over time, these patterns erode authenticity. The person who's being so nice starts to feel frustrated, unseen, or even resentful, but they're trapped by the very image they've created. They're afraid that if they stop being friendly, people won't know what to do with them. They worry about seeming cold, rude, or ungrateful. And so they keep performing, even as it costs them their energy, their truth, and their ability to be known for who they really are. There's a significant difference between friendliness that comes from a grounded sense of self and friendliness that comes from the fear of being disliked. The former is generous, open, and sincere. The latter is performative, anxious, and exhausting. When friendliness becomes a shield, it no longer serves connection. It becomes a barrier. It keeps people at arm's length, even while appearing to invite them in. People might enjoy your company, but they don't truly know you because the version you're presenting isn't rooted in your authentic self. It's filtered, adjusted, and often silenced. People pleasing is a learned survival mechanism, not a personality trait. It often gets mistaken for being easygoing, helpful, or naturally kind, but at its core, it's something much deeper. It's a behavioral response shaped over time, often beginning in childhood or during formative experiences where being accepted, loved, or simply safe depended on how well one could meet others' expectations. When someone grows up in an environment where love feels conditional based on performance, obedience, or compliance, they begin to internalize the message that their value comes from how useful, agreeable, or pleasant they can be. Over time, this becomes automatic. The person doesn't choose to please others out of joy. They do it because they've learned that it's the safest option available. This survival response might be hard to identify at first, especially when it receives praise. Society often rewards people who are accommodating, who never complain, who put others first. These behaviors are labeled as virtuous, especially in women or those raised with strong cultural or familial expectations around politeness and self-sacrifice. But what isn't visible is the internal cost. People pleasers often carry the silent burden of suppressing their own needs, ignoring their instincts, and silencing their discomfort for the sake of preserving harmony or avoiding confrontation. What looks like a personality on the outside, someone who's always agreeable or low maintenance, is often the result of someone who's learned that their needs aren't as important as keeping others happy. There's also a neurological and emotional basis for this. When the brain perceives a threat, whether physical, emotional, or relational, it responds with one of several reactions: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. The fawn response, less talked about but just as real, is the instinct to appease, to accommodate, to make yourself small so that the threat goes away. People pleasing is often the fawn response in action. It's the nervous system doing what it can to protect a person from perceived danger, disapproval, rejection, punishment. Over time, this can become the default way of interacting with the world. It's not a sign of weakness or lack of self-respect. It's the mark of someone who's been deeply conditioned to equate safety with submission. Because it's a learned behavior, people pleasing can also be unlearned, but not without effort, reflection, and often discomfort. Letting go of the role of the peacemaker or fixer means confronting the fear of conflict, the guilt of saying no, and the anxiety that comes with being misunderstood or disliked. It requires building a new understanding of self-worth, one that isn't tied to other people's perceptions. This work can be difficult because people pleasers are often praised for their behavior. They are the ones who never say no, who show up for everyone, who carry more than their fair share in relationships and workplaces. But this kind of constant emotional labor isn't sustainable, and eventually it leads to burnout, resentment, or a sense of losing touch with one's own identity. What's especially challenging is how subtle people pleasing can become. It can disguise itself as being flexible, easy to get along with, or team-oriented. But underneath, there may be a persistent fear of letting others down or being perceived as selfish. Decisions are made not from internal conviction, but from external pressure. Boundaries are rarely set, and if they are, they're often soft or quickly overridden. The person might say yes when they mean no, agree to things they resent, or take responsibility for other people's emotions. It's exhausting not because the person lacks strength, but because they're constantly suppressing their authentic response to accommodate others. Constant friendliness can lead to betrayal, and resentment. At first, it might feel like the right thing to do, being nice, agreeable, and easygoing in every situation. It feels safe, it feels acceptable, it feels like the path of least resistance. But over time, that constant friendliness starts to chip away at something important. It erodes the boundary between who you are and who you pretend to be in order to make others comfortable. What begins as small compromises eventually grows into a deep disconnect between your outer behavior and your inner truth. You nod when you disagree, you smile when you're uncomfortable, you offer help when you're already overwhelmed. And all the while, something inside begins to whisper that this isn't right. It starts slowly. You ignore the discomfort in your chest when someone makes a request that you don't have the energy to fulfill. You tell yourself it's no big deal, that you're just being generous or helpful. You push your feelings to the background and move forward with a smile. And people around you thank you. They admire how reliable you are, how nice, how thoughtful. You become the one people depend on, the one who always says yes, the one who keeps the peace. But inside, a quiet tension begins to grow. You begin to notice that your needs are rarely considered. Your opinions are rarely voiced. Your time is often taken for granted. Yet still, you smile and keep going. As this pattern continues, a subtle form of self-betrayal begins to take root. You start abandoning your own boundaries to avoid discomfort. You override your intuition to avoid seeming difficult. You swallow your words because you fear being seen as confrontational. And each time you do this, you send a message to yourself that your truth matters less than others' comfort. That your needs are secondary, that being liked is more important than being known. And even though you're surrounded by people, you may begin to feel alone, unseen, or even invisible. The mask of friendliness becomes a barrier rather than a bridge. Over time, this self-betrayal turns into resentment, not just toward others who make demands of you, but toward yourself for allowing it. You begin to feel anger at the situations you keep stepping into, but you don't know how to step out. You might catch yourself thinking, why does no one ever ask what I want? Or why am I always the one adjusting? But the truth is, the resentment is rooted in the moments when you silenced your own voice. The problem isn't just that others ask, it's that you say yes without checking in with your truth. It's that you perform politeness instead of practicing honesty, and eventually, the weight of that performance becomes unbearable. This kind of resentment is particularly tricky because it doesn't always have a clear target. It doesn't come from one big betrayal, but from 1,000 small ones. It's the result of a pattern that has gone unchallenged for too long, and it often lives beneath the surface, hidden under layers of smiles and "I'm fine." But the body knows. The spirit knows, and eventually that inner conflict demands to be acknowledged. It might show up as burnout. It might show up as emotional numbness. It might even show up as a desire to withdraw completely from the very relationships you worked so hard to maintain. And that's because the version of you that's being maintained isn't the full truth. It's a curated version, built to protect others' comfort at the cost of your own authenticity. True connection requires boundaries, not endless accommodation. In a world where being agreeable is often rewarded and celebrated, it's easy to confuse accommodating others with building strong relationships. We're taught that saying yes, making ourselves available, and never causing friction is the way to maintain closeness. But the reality is that connection without boundaries is not connection at all. It's performance. It's a one-sided exchange where one person is seen, heard, and honored while the other slowly disappears behind a wall of constant compromise. Real connection begins where honesty lives, and honesty cannot exist without limits. Boundaries are not barriers to love or friendship. They are the conditions under which love and friendship can thrive. They are the lines that tell others, "This is where I end and you begin." Without them, we risk losing ourselves in the effort to be everything for everyone. It might feel good to be accommodating at first. It might feel like generosity or support. But if that accommodation comes at the cost of your energy, your truth, or your emotional well-being, then it's not sustainable. And over time, the relationship that's built on that imbalance begins to feel heavy. One person is always carrying the weight while the other moves freely. Many people equate setting boundaries with being selfish or unkind, especially if they were raised in environments where self-sacrifice was seen as noble. They believe that saying no means disappointing others. They fear that expressing a need might be taken as a rejection. So instead of speaking up, they keep adjusting. They make room. They silence their discomfort. And in doing so, they create a version of themselves that is always agreeable, always available, always yes. But real connection doesn't ask you to be always yes. It asks you to be real. It asks you to show up with your truth, even when it's inconvenient, even when it disrupts the peace. When you set boundaries, you give others the opportunity to know the real you. You invite them into a relationship that is honest and respectful, where both people's needs matter. Boundaries create clarity. They eliminate guesswork. They allow you to engage with others from a place of wholeness instead of depletion. And they communicate self-respect. People often worry that if they set boundaries, they will be abandoned. But the truth is, people who are only connected to your compliance are not connected to you. They are connected to the version of you that makes their life easier, not the version of you that is whole and human. Boundaries also create safety. When you know your limits and communicate them, you reduce the likelihood of building resentment. You create relationships where expectations are clear and emotional labor is shared. You stop overextending and start operating from integrity. That doesn't mean relationships become conflict-free. In fact, healthy conflict is part of real connection. But it means you're no longer afraid to disappoint others if it means being honest with yourself. You learn that saying no is not an attack, it's a declaration of where your values lie. There is strength in learning to say, "That doesn't work for me," or "I need some time," or "I can't take that on right now." These are not signs of weakness. They are signs of someone who understands their worth, someone who knows that connection that comes at the cost of self-erasure is not true connection. And when you operate from that place, the relationships that remain, those that honor your boundaries, that respect your truth, are deeper, stronger, and more fulfilling than any that demanded you. Silence or sacrifice, approval from others is not a substitute for self-respect. The desire to be liked, accepted, and validated by those around us is deeply human. From early childhood, we learn that approval earns us smiles, praise, and a sense of belonging. We carry that lesson into adulthood, shaping our behavior, words, and even our identities in response to what we believe will make others accept us. Over time, this pursuit of approval can become a quiet obsession, a background noise driving our choices without us even realizing it. We say what people want to hear. We avoid conflict even when something feels wrong. We shift in relationships, workplaces, and social spaces to avoid judgment and maintain harmony, believing that if others approve of us, then we must be doing something right. But the approval of others is fleeting and inconsistent. It can shift based on circumstances, moods, and perceptions that we have no control over. When we build our self-worth around external validation, we become prisoners to opinions. We start checking in with everyone else before we check in with ourselves. We rely on feedback, praise, or attention as signals of our value. And when those things are absent or negative, we question our worth. This dependence on approval creates anxiety, insecurity, and a fragile sense of self that requires constant reinforcement. We begin to fear authenticity because it might not be well received. We fear saying no, setting boundaries, or expressing dissent because it might cost us approval. Self-respect, on the other hand, is stable. It doesn't rise or fall with others' opinions. It's not rooted in how many people like you, how many compliments you receive, or how many times you're praised for being easygoing or accommodating. Self-respect comes from knowing who you are and standing by that, even when it's inconvenient, unpopular, or misunderstood. It's about being able to look yourself in the mirror and feel proud of how you showed up, even if no one else noticed or applauded you. It's about making choices that align with your values, not just with expectations. Living for approval often means abandoning our own truth. It means smiling when we're upset, agreeing when we want to resist, showing up when we're exhausted, and minimizing ourselves so that others feel more comfortable. Over time, we begin to lose the ability to identify what we want, need, or feel because we're so attuned to what others expect. The problem isn't that approval feels good, it's that we begin to chase it at the cost of our authenticity. We confuse being liked with being valued, but being liked is about conforming to what others want. Being valued is about being accepted for who we truly are. There's nothing wrong with enjoying recognition or wanting to be accepted, but when those things become the foundation of our identity, we give away our power. We live reactively, adjusting to the opinions and preferences of others instead of leading from our own convictions. We become so focused on staying in people's good graces that we forget to ask if those people are even aligned with our truth. We forget to ask if we like who we're becoming in the process. Choosing self-respect means letting go of the illusion that you can make everyone happy. It means understanding that not everyone will approve of you, no matter how hard you try, and that's okay. Because the goal is not universal approval, the goal is integrity. The goal is showing up in a way that's honest, grounded, and aligned with your core. Approval may be the applause from the crowd, but self-respect is the quiet, steady voice that says you did what felt right, even if no one else noticed. Courageous honesty is more powerful than polite performance. In a culture that often prizes being nice over being real, many people find themselves stuck in roles they never chose. They become the peacemakers, the agreeable ones, the people who know how to smooth things over, diffuse tension, and keep everyone else comfortable. Politeness becomes a default mode of existence, not just in words, but in body language, in decisions, in how they navigate conflict and connection. It's not that they don't have opinions or emotions. It's that those truths are often buried beneath a polished exterior that was built to please and protect. And while being polite may earn approval, it rarely leads to authenticity or deep connection. There is a difference between kindness and politeness. Kindness comes from a place of empathy and integrity, where truth is spoken with care and boundaries are communicated with compassion. Politeness, when it becomes performative, often has less to do with compassion and more to do with fear of judgment, rejection, conflict, or vulnerability. It's the instinct to say yes when we mean no, to laugh along when something offends us, to stay silent when something matters. It's the habit of prioritizing appearances over substance, harmony over honesty, and acceptance over authenticity, The cost of polite performance is not always obvious right away. On the surface, everything seems smooth. People like you. Conversations feel easy. You avoid confrontation. But underneath, there's a growing disconnection from your own voice. A part of you begins to wonder if anyone really knows you, or if they simply know the version of you that's been tailored to be digestible. You start to question whether your relationships are real or just the result of carefully curated behaviors. You wonder how often you've chosen to be liked instead of choosing to be known. Courageous honesty changes that dynamic. It's the practice of speaking your truth even when your voice shakes. It's showing up with your full humanity, flaws, edges, uncertainties, and all. It's saying, I disagree, or that hurt, or I'm not okay with that, even when those words feel risky. Honesty doesn't mean being harsh or careless. It doesn't mean unloading without regard for others. It means being rooted in self-awareness, expressing yourself with respect, and allowing the space for real dialogue instead of rehearsed performance. The power of courageous honesty lies in what it creates. It may cause discomfort in the moment, but it builds trust in the long run. People begin to feel your authenticity. They begin to understand your values. They know where you stand. Even if they disagree, they know you are real. And that reliability creates stronger connections than any amount of surface-level politeness ever could. Courageous honesty also invites others to be honest too. It sets a tone of permission. It says, we don't have to pretend here. That kind of space is rare, but it's also sacred. It's where true growth, intimacy, and healing happen. Living with courageous honesty also means being honest with yourself. It means recognizing when you're shrinking to fit into others' expectations. It means asking hard questions. Am I saying this to be accepted or because it's true for me? Am I agreeing out of alignment or out of fear? Am I presenting myself the way I want to be seen or the way I think they want me to be? That level of internal inquiry takes bravery, but it is the path to personal freedom. You stop performing and start existing in your truth. The world does not need more polished performances. It needs more people willing to be honest and whole. People who are not afraid to speak up when something matters, who are not afraid to disrupt comfort in the name of clarity, who are not afraid to disappoint others in order to remain loyal to themselves. Courageous honesty is a radical act in a culture of conformity. It's not easy, but it is necessary for any life or relationship that aims to be real rather than rehearsed. We live in a world that often confuses being liked with being whole, where politeness is rewarded more than truth, and where being agreeable is seen as a virtue, even when it comes at the cost of our identity. But the cost of being too friendly, of constantly performing, pleasing, and accommodating is our authenticity, our boundaries, and ultimately our self-respect. This speech has not been a call to abandon kindness or empathy. It has been a call to stop mistaking compliance for connection, approval for worth, and friendliness for truth. The path forward isn't about becoming hard or cold. It's about becoming honest, grounded, and courageous enough to stop abandoning yourself in order to be accepted by others. Because the people who are meant for you, the ones who will truly see, respect, and value you, won't require you to be anything less than fully, unapologetically yourself.